Good morning, everybody. This is Brandon. We will be beginning the AirWatch webinar momentarily. We're just going to wait for a few more people to come in. I can see the numbers are slowly climbing up. So if you could just do me a favor and in the chat on the right-hand side, just state your first, last name, and what school you're from so we can get an idea. We'll take attendance. Thank you. If we don't get somebody in the chat just to sort of say they're here, we may have to... Oh, there we go. Hi, Patrizia. We're going to be getting momentarily. I'm just going to give a few more minutes for some stragglers to join in, and then we'll get started on the presentation. And just a few more moments. Sorry about that. We'll probably get started at 11:35. Still see people coming in. All right. Well, just due to time constraints, I'm just going to go ahead and get started now, and hopefully those who come in won't really miss much as at the beginning, just because we'll kind of go over some brief, fluffy information. So welcome, I guess, Patrizia for now, and anyone else who may be watching, to the AirWatch webinar. My name is Brandon, and over to my left I have one of my colleagues here, Felipe, who will be fielding the chat room. We're going to be talking about AirWatch, which is the Toronto District School Board's new enterprise mobility management product that we use for managing iPads at our school. So before we begin, I just want to let you know that this webinar is recorded and it will be available at the end of the webinar using the same YouTube link that you're using right now to watch it. I do need to tell you also that there is about a 10-second delay between the time that you actually hear my voice and the time that I've said it. So if for whatever reason you say something in the chat and I'm supposed to address it and I haven't addressed it right away, that would be why. So just note that 10-second delay. Also, do feel free to ask questions in the chat on the right-hand side. Any quick question that you guys have, we'll have Felipe answer within the chat, and anything more complex, he will take that away, and then there's going to be a Q&A period at the end of the webinar where I can at least have more time to explain in greater detail those particular questions. Okay, so before we begin, I just want to let you know that before we begin, there is some quality settings on the bottom right hand side to adjust the video. So if you're noticing that the quality is a little bit low, or you can't quite make out what I'm saying, or make out any of the text on the screen, you just want to basically click the gear icon in the bottom left hand side, and then you will adjust the quality settings to something higher than the default of 480p. So you click there, and you'll see there should be some HD options there, like 1080p and 720p, and that way you'll probably have a better viewing experience when you're watching the video. Also, sometimes what happens is the video does fall a little bit behind in terms of the live feed, so you might not be watching the livest version possible. And how you can verify that is if you just look at the bottom of YouTube, you'll see that there is a live button, and by selecting that and making sure that it goes from a little gray dot to a red dot, you'll know that you're on the quote-unquote livest version possible. So the objectives for today are to familiarize schools with AirWatch and managing iPads. We intend to highlight the key benefits of AirWatch for you and demonstrate in a real-world scenario how you will be using AirWatch at your school. So AirWatch, what is it? Well, AirWatch is a mobile device management system, MDM, or an enterprise mobility management system. Those two terms are interchangeable, so if at any point you hear me say MDM or EMM, just note that they refer to the exact same thing. They basically both refer to a product that is a centralized portal for configuring and managing your mobile devices. So we use AirWatch essentially as a centralized hub to manage all our iPads, as opposed to having to go to each individual one. So the benefits for AirWatch are that it allows automatic TDSB wireless network access to the WLAN. So no longer will we have to go up to each iPad and join either TDSB staff, student, or now TDSB-Wi-Fi. They'll basically be able to join the wireless network on the WLAN without the need of a username and password. And they're set to do this by default. Also, there is now easy app installation for multiple iPads, so as opposed to before where you'd have to go up to each individual iPad, sign into the App Store, and download an app on each individual iPad, which was very time consuming. You can now push out apps from AirWatch, which we will demonstrate in this webinar. There's also consistent experience and look and feel between the iPads based on your configuration, so you'll note all of your AirWatch iPads do have the same blue background and the TDSB logo on the lock screen. There's also built-in security policies that will prevent students from adding or removing apps or applying passcodes. I don't know if you've ever had the privilege of having a student put a passcode on the device and then not being able to, get past that passcode because they didn't tell you what the passcode was. And then that would effectively lock the device and you'd have to wipe it. So with AirWatch, there is basically a mechanism in place that will allow you the students cannot do that. It also allows remote configuration and updates, so it's all done over Wi-Fi. You don't have to plug it into the computer to do anything. And it will also, as I stated, it will remove the requirement for the Apple ID. So, who can log in? Principals and AirWatch administrators. So principals by default have access to log into the AirWatch console. Before we get your school set up in AirWatch, what we do is we contact your principals and we ask them to add users in through LAS to have the ability to administer AirWatch. So that step should have already been done if we're at this point in the process where you guys are watching the webinar. So you guys all hopefully at this point have access to the AirWatch console, but that is the concept. In LAS, your principal can add any user at the school into AirWatch. But just note that it could take 12 to 24 hours before that change takes effect. That's just because it synchronizes every night with LAS, between LAS and AirWatch. So this demo will cover the iPad's new look and feel. We're going to go over navigating the AirWatch console. We're going to show you how to organize your iPads into what AirWatch refers to as smart groups, and as well as adding and removing apps and web clips on the iPads. So to begin, it's important to show you that the new look and feel of the iPads. You'll note that there is the presence of two particular icons, or apps we'll say. You'll see Agent and the Catalog, and that should tell you that that iPad is enrolled in AirWatch. Oh, sorry, let me go back there. So the agent and the catalog. So actually, I'm just going to show you on, I have a test iPad here, and I will just connect in here. Bear with me. And that should pop up on my screen. Come on. This always happens on webinars. Oh, it's right there. Okay. So here's an example of an iPad that is currently enrolled in AirWatch, and as you can see, there are two particular icons that you'll see on here that you won't see on other iPads that are not in AirWatch, and that is the Agent app and the Catalog app. And as I showed you, or sorry, as I mentioned in the previous slide, with the AirWatch Agent existing on this device, there are some built-in security policies that will prevent students from adding a passcode to the device, and as well as adding the App Store. So we'll notice the first thing that we see here is that there is no App Store showing up on this device. That is because we're not going to use the App Store to push out apps to this iPad. We're going to be using AirWatch to push out apps to this iPad. And as well, if I go into settings, we don't see the option there anymore to set a passcode on the device. However, an important thing to show you about AirWatch is that in its current state, we'll consider this what's known as student mode, which essentially means that right now, a student would be have this iPad in their hands, and they wouldn't have the ability to put those passcodes or to download apps on this iPad. Now, if at any point you want to override that, we can actually log into the AirWatch agent. So if I tap this agent app right here, it'll prompt us for our username and password. And basically, any TDSB staff member can punch in their employee number and password here, and it'll change it from this quote-unquote student mode to the teacher mode. It says my App Store icon still shows even though the iPads are set up. So do you see that your iPads, do they have the agent app on there? Sorry if you're just getting this 10 seconds later. I'm just going to swipe away from the iPad here just because last time I did this on a webinar, I typed in my password, and you could actually go back and watch me type in my password, and that was not very secure. So I'm just going to type in here. 512. Okay. So here, I'll bring up the iPad again. So as you can see, I have the Agent app open on the iPad. So right now we're just dealing with the device side of things. And right now, after typing in my employee number and password, and then when I tap Login, what I should see is that the iPad will go from that sort of lockdown state where you see the App Store to a state of where I can actually modify the different settings. So once it's actually finished the login process, when I hit the home screen, what I should see is now the App Store appears. So you can see the App Store right there. So I could then go into the App Store and download apps because now it's basically I've authenticated as a teacher or basically any staff member, and I have the ability now to use the App Store. And as well, I can go to settings, and all the other options that were not previously there, such as passcode, are now available. Now, assuming I'm ready to give this back to a student, and I don't want to leave myself signed in here because then I'm basically leaving all these controls open for a student. So what I do is I go back into the Agent app and I will tap the Logout button. And once that's completed logging out, what I should see is the the App Store icon will disappear when I hit the home button. So now we're back at the home screen, and that App Store, well, it's still there. Sometimes it takes a little bit for the network to kick in. There it goes. Yeah, see, now it's gone. So now I can hand this back to a student, not have to worry about them going and downloading apps and putting them onto the iPad. Same thing if I go into settings and I look on the left-hand side, those options for the passcode are now gone. So I'm just looking at the chat here, and what it sounds like you're referring to is when you are wiping an iPad, or sorry, when you're first getting started in AirWatch, it asks you to type in a number. I guess actually I can probably show this hopefully really quick. The only problem is I can't really connect my iPad to the software that I use to display it. So actually I'll just fire up. Hopefully maybe you guys can see my webcam because I actually have another one here. Sorry that you have to see my horrible face, but it's the only way I can really show this video. Hello everyone. So this is an important part as to why you may not be seeing if you don't see your iPad in AirWatch, that's assuming you can log in, or you see that your iPad has the agent on it, but you still see the App Store. Generally speaking, what that means is the enrollment process didn't go, quote unquote, correctly. And when I say correctly, during the actual enrollment step, when you're doing the initial setup, hopefully you guys can see that. So you would choose your language, English, Canada. We join the Wi-Fi. So we choose TDSB Wi-Fi. Sorry, when I join TDSB Wi-Fi, let me type in my employee number and password. And I join the Wi-Fi, and after I type my employee number and password, what I should see is it asks me to trust a wireless certificate. So yeah, your iPads are generally enrolled, but there's an important part that I just want to show you here, because you actually might see the agent app on the iPad, and that'll tell you, oh, it's enrolled, and technically it is enrolled, but the problem is this particular part here. So after we join the Wi-Fi, what it does, it says the Toronto District School Board will automatically configure your iPad. I click next, and then it asks me again for a username and password. Hopefully that loads soon. There we go. So now it's saying username and password. This is one of the biggest things that we see, is that people call us and they say, I don't see my iPad in AirWatch. And that's because when they got to this step, when it asked for the username and password, if you typed in your employee number and password, it will basically go into like a catch-all group, a group that basically will not put it in the same behavior that we see with this other iPad where I have the check-in, check-out feature. So what I actually do with an iPad like this, when I get to this enrollment part, for username and password, I type in my school's 4-digit Trillium number or site code. In the case of, I'll use my test school. In the case of my test school, I would type in 9991 for the username, and then for the password, I would type in 9991. So your site code might be different. And this is the important part. This is the part that actually tells this tells this iPad to go to your school's group in AirWatch. So if you don't type in your school's Trillium number as the username and the password, it doesn't go into your school's AirWatch, basically. You won't see it in the list later on. So this is the actual part that puts it inside of your school group. So those are really the two instances that I can think of. We might have to investigate a little bit more. If you have a ticket open, I'll be sure to take a look at that later, but that might be what you're seeing. So that's the idea here of the enrollment process, is when we get to that username and password section, we type in our school's Trillium number. So that's the device side of things. Again, with an AirWatch iPad, you should see both the agent and the catalog. That tells you that's an AirWatch. But like I said, it's very possible that your iPad might not be enrolled in your school, depending on what you did on that step where it asked you to type in the username and password. If you didn't type in your school's Trillium number at that moment, it's almost like we'll say a lost iPad. Lost in the sense that it's not allocated to your school's group. So that's the device side of things. Now we're going to switch over to the actual AirWatch console. So now that we know we have an iPad in our AirWatch environment and we can see that it's enrolled, we can actually log into the AirWatch console and manage those iPads from here. So with the AirWatch console, you can log in from anywhere on the web, not just within the TDSB. It is a cloud web application. There is no browser limitation that we're aware of. Essentially, it should work on all browsers: Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, whatever you want. The link is right here at the bottom, cn239.awmdm.com. I know that sounds like a mouthful. We do have a link also in the video description below, so feel free to click that and attempt to log in if you would like. But the important part to know is when you're logging into the AirWatch console is the way that we actually type in our username and password. So for our username, it's not just our employee number and password. We actually have to type in this prefix of TDSB / then our employee number, and then our current network password. And it's only if you type in that TDSB / and then your employee number will it allow you to log in. And of course, when we first log in, it'll tell us to create a 4-digit PIN on first login. So what you should see is when you go to log into the AirWatch console, it'll prompt you to accept the terms of agreement and then create a 4-digit PIN. So I'll just quickly show you. There goes my face again. So I actually have, let me just sign out. My apologies, I forgot to log out here. Okay, so here's the AirWatch console. So you can click the link in the video description if you would like. And for the username, we're going to type in again, the TDSB prefix, so TDSB / and then our employee number, and then our password. And this is basically your current network password, the same one you would use to log into any computer or to check your email. So once I type in my TDSB / and then my employee number, then my password, I can click login. I do just also want to note that this TDSB part is actually not case sensitive, so you can type it in lowercase, you can type it in mixed case, it doesn't matter. As long as you have TDSB / and then your employee number, and I say / being the / key that's above the enter key, not the one directly to the left of the shift key. As long as you have that TDSB / part, you shouldn't have any issues logging in, assuming you've been added into AirWatch. So we click login. And for me, it actually just comes in right away. Now for you, you might be seeing this because it is the first time you're logging in. So I did mention that there's a 4-digit PIN code you have to create. You might, first before you see the 4-digit PIN code is you'll see the accept terms of agreement. And you just click accept on that. And then this create the 4-digit PIN. So this 4-digit PIN, you can change it later if you forget, but essentially this 4-digit PIN is just added. It's an added verification before you do certain tasks, which I'll show later. Such as, for example, when I want to wipe a device, if I don't want to accidentally wipe a device, it asks me to type in this 4-digit PIN, just so I don't do it accidentally. I should get rid of that, so that keeps coming up. My apologies. Let me go back to the AirWatch console. So, Patrizia, I am seeing what's going on in the chat, and it sounds like you have devices that are listed in AirWatch, but they are not in your school group. If you want, there's a Q&A period at the end of this webinar, and I can actually, I'll go into your environment and we can take a look at that. So I don't know, it'd probably be at the end of this webinar. So if you have time to stick around, I'd be happy to investigate that with you, even over this platform here, because then we can take the more time that it needs to see exactly what's going on and get a better understanding of what's happening. 2 seconds here, everybody. I just have to check something on my iPad. Sorry about that, everyone. It looks like there were some weird connection issues I was having over here. So, getting back to the webinar, hopefully Felipe can... I'm seeing a lot of chatter going on in the chat, so hopefully we can get him to answer that. Let's say, hi, not logged into AirWatch's employee number and password did not work. So I don't know if you saw what I showed earlier, but it's not just your employee number and password. Here, I'll log out again just to quickly show you. It's actually, it's TDSB, and then a /, and then your employee number, and then your password. So you got your blah blah blah. Felipe, would you do me a favor and just check if you guys don't mind posting your employee number? Well, you gave me your employee number, so that works. I'll have Felipe check to make sure that you're actually have been added into AirWatch, because that's one of the steps that we do is when we first contact your principal and explain the project, is we have them add users into AirWatch through LAS. No? Okay, so that's exactly what's going on. Diana, it looks like you have not been added into AirWatch through LAS. So is there anyone in that group? So I guess that would be, I don't know if you're on street. Member of. No, yeah, yeah. So you haven't been added into the AirWatch environment, but basically what I can do is, now that I have your employee number, is after this webinar is over, we can reach out to your principal and have him add you in through LAS, and we can actually just walk him through it. Okay. So yeah, it looks like no one's added for your school group. So if you could just follow along with the video, you don't necessarily need to log in because I'm just going to be explaining it, and you'll see basically the video that I have here. It'll, you can probably follow along pretty well, just to get an idea of what's going on here. But yeah, we'll make sure to contact your principal and get you added into the AirWatch group. And it's all done through LAS. It's not really cumbersome or anything like that. But carrying on, now that we have logged into the AirWatch console, the first thing I see is the dashboard. I'm not going to spend too much time on the dashboard. The dashboard is basically just a general overview of your AirWatch environment. So in the case of my test school that I see up here, it shows that I have 15 devices loaded in AirWatch, and there's basically some graphical statistics here of my AirWatch environment, such as, for example, 60% of my devices have no passcode, and some useful statistics here might be, for example, the last seen breakdown. So this tells me, how many days ago did that iPad check in at AirWatch. So you can use the dashboard to check out these figures and sort of act upon what these figures tell you. So for example, I see here that there's an iPad here that hasn't been checked in or hasn't been seen in 31 days. So just looking through the dashboard, when I'm looking at this and I see there's maybe an iPad that hasn't been seen in 16 to 30 days, seen being that it's last came online and reported in to AirWatch. But what I can do is I can actually, if I hover my mouse over any of these graphics, it'll actually, you can see that it changes colors, and it's basically interactive graphics. I can click the graphic and it will take me over to a list of my devices, and it'll basically show me which device it's referring to with that statistic. So that's really the dashboard. Let me just switch back over. Also, I must note that AirWatch can be a little bit slow at times just because it is a cloud application, and depending on how many people are using it, sometimes the console's not as responsive as it should be. But it seems to be okay for today. But yeah, this is generally the dashboard. It just shows you a graphical breakdown of your AirWatch environment. You guys probably won't see any Android devices in your environment for now. It'll all be related to Apple devices, and just, version of your iPad, little things like that. So if you want to get some statistics, it's always on the dashboard. I'm going to switch over to list view, and list view is will be where you will spend your initial most amount of time. And the list view will basically just show you a list of all your iPads in your AirWatch environment. So this is basically a list of all the iPads, and I even have some Android devices that are in here. And it just kind of gives me a general sense of how many devices I have in here. And I can see some brief information, such as what kind of device is it under platform. It'll say Apple iOS, and it's an iPad 4th gen, and it's got 32 gigs. The problem here is that when I first enroll my devices in AirWatch, they actually come in with these weird cryptic names. So these weird cryptic names aren't really helpful for me. Now, some of them I've already renamed. As you can see here, we got the Client Relations iPad, and the iPad that I have with me is the iPad in brackets Webinar. But that one that I actually showed you when I was on the webcam and I was enrolling it, and I used the 9991 code, it came in as this weird cryptic thing that I see here, this iPad 3, 4, ECB, whatever. You might want to rename, and when I say might, you should, rename any iPad that doesn't have a meaningful name to you, because when you're looking at this list, you need to be able to identify which iPad is which. So you have the physical iPad in your hand, and you're looking at a list of iPads as they appear in AirWatch. So when you're working in AirWatch, if you have a bunch of iPads and they say iPad 1, iPad 2, iPad 3, or even they actually won't come in with numbers at all. It'll just say iPad, 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 iPad. So if you can't match up your iPad that you see in AirWatch with the iPad that you have in your hand, it's going to be a little bit difficult later on when you want to group them together and then apply apps based on that group. So I'm going to just show you really quick how we can rename these iPads, and we can actually do it right here from the list view. So when I'm looking at a list of my devices, let's say I want to rename this first one up here. This is iPad 3, 4, EC, BBBB, and I have the iPad in my hand. So I know that this iPad belongs to this iPad that I'm seeing here. And what I can do is if I have a naming convention in my school, I can click, sorry, I went a little fast there. I can click the pencil icon right next to that iPad, right over here. If I click that pencil icon, it'll come up with a window here that says Edit Device. And this will allow me to change the name of the iPad. This is where you guys might want to set it something that is meaningful to you. So if you already have a sort of naming convention at your school of how your iPads are labeled, so you might have, for example, a label on the back of them that'll say this is iPad 1 or iPad 2 or grade 5 iPad 1 or grade 5 iPad 2. This is where you'd want to name it so that you could have it physically look at the device and be able to tell which one it is here in AirWatch. So say, for example, this iPad that I'm working with here has a label on the back of it that says grade 5 iPad number 2. I might want to call it something like that. So I would call this grade 5 iPad, and I'll even go a step further and give it the number 2. So that way, when I'm looking at AirWatch, I know exactly which iPad this one's referring to. There's also a checkbox here that says Set Friendly Name as Device Name. If I check this off, this will actually take this name and push it over to the iPad so that I can see it in General and About. Let me just click Save, so I'll just show you really quick. That this iPad here, this iPad 3, 4, blah, 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 refreshes, and now it's called grade 5 iPad number 2. So again, you just click the pencil icon next to the iPad you want to rename, and I'll call this one grade 5. Actually, let's go with another naming convention. Let's say this one belongs to a library cart. I'll call it library cart number 5. So now that I know that this iPad, when I go to look at it later, it belongs to the library cart, and it's the 5th iPad. Maybe be labeled that. And I check off that Set Friendly Name as Device Name. So once I click Save, what I'm referring to when I say Set Friendly Name as Device Name with that checkbox is, I'll just show you on my iPad here. So this is the iPad that I just renamed to Library Cart. If I go into Settings, and then I go over to General, and then at the top About, the name actually shows here in AirWatch. So it is important to note that I can actually take the name that I set in AirWatch and push it over to Settings, General, About, and then the name of the iPad that you see here. However, it doesn't work the other way. We get this question a lot. So for example, if I were to come in here and rename the iPad from this end, it actually doesn't push it over to AirWatch, which is kind of unfortunate because that would probably be better for renaming iPads, but it's just not a feature that exists. So just keep in mind that AirWatch pushes the name to the iPad and not the other way around. But at least now that I've renamed it, I know that when I'm working with this iPad, I can see that this is the library cart number 5. So this is list view again. It just shows you a list of all the iPads. So as you're enrolling devices in your environment, you'll see them slowly come in to your AirWatch environment. What I would recommend is when you're going through the actual enrollment process is that as you're enrolling the devices, you should probably rename them as they come in. Because when you start enrolling the devices, they first come in with the name of iPad. So you might start, if you, for example, were to enroll 3, you would see 3 iPads in this list. And then it's like, okay, well, which one's which? There is another way around that if you have a bunch of iPads that are named the same thing. It's a little bit more cumbersome. So let's just going off that example here, I'll just change this to iPad, and I'll change my other one here, if it ever loads, my library cart, and I'll change this one to iPad 2. So this might be more what you guys see when you're first in your AirWatch environment. And where you're first enrolling devices. So say I just enrolled these 2 devices here, I'll see that they have both called iPad. And what also doesn't help me is that not only are they both called iPad, but they're also the exact same model. They're both iPad 4th gens, 32 gigabyte black. They both have the same version number. Sorry, well, Oops, click that. They both have the same iOS version number. Let me go back here. Yeah. So you'll see 10.2.1, 10.2.1. So I don't know which one's which. So when it comes time to rename it, how do I know which one do I rename? So what I can do is on my iPad, I can go over to Settings, and again, in General down here at the bottom, I can then click About, and the value that I want to note is the serial number here. I don't know if you can see it right here, DMPK, blah, blah, blah. So if I take that serial number and I plug it into AirWatch, let me see if I can collapse these windows here so that I can show you. I'll flip this so I can see it better. Bear with me as I try to reorganize my windows here. I just want to get it all on the same screen so you guys can get an idea of what I'm showing here. So I'm looking at my list of iPads, and I have my iPad here under Settings, General, and About. I see that serial number down there at the bottom. If I want to discover which iPad is this one, I can actually use the search field over here in the top right-hand corner, and I can actually punch in the serial number in that search field, and it will filter down based on that iPad. So in this case, this one is DMP, let's say K6385F183. So I've punched in the serial number in that search field, and once I hit enter, what it's going to do is it's going to filter through that list and find that serial number. So now I know, okay, this iPad, although not cleverly named, I can at least tell that it's belonging to the one that I'm holding in my hand. So now I can go ahead and rename it to something meaningful to me. So let's go back and we'll call it again. What do we call it? We call it library cart number 5. And I'll set the friendly name as device name again, and click Save. And now it's called library cart number 5. So now it all matches up very nicely, and I can move on. So the initial part of getting things enrolled in AirWatch and renaming them is a little bit cumbersome, but it is important to do that because down the road it'll make your lives a lot easier when it comes to managing the iPads. So that's the list view. Again, it just shows you a list of your devices. Sorry, I don't see my devices because I haven't cleared out the field there. You can actually go into each individual iPad for more information. So if I actually click the iPad, it'll switch over from list view to details view. And then in the details view, it just kind of shows me some general information regarding the iPad, such as the serial number that we just looked at. Shows me the storage capacity, the battery power, physical memory, if there's any available OS updates. And once we're in this details view, we're shifting our focus from a list of our iPads to just one. And from here, we actually have some more things that we can do on the iPad. And we do that by looking up here at the top right-hand corner where it says More Actions. There are some different things that we can do here. So for example, there is an option here to do an iOS update. If, for example, this iPad had an iOS update, I can actually just trigger it from here. And what it'll do is it'll tell this iPad, you got to go update right now. There's also the device wipe. So as I mentioned earlier, the device wipe will actually just wipe the device, but it will also prompt you for that 4-digit passcode that we created when we first logged in. So if I scroll down here, you can see it's telling me to enter my security PIN. And if I were to type in my PIN correctly, I didn't type it in correctly on purpose because I don't want to wipe my iPad for the remainder of this webinar, but you get the idea. If I typed in my PIN correctly, what would happen is that device would actually start wiping without having to actually, plug it into a computer and hook it up to iTunes or anything of that sort. Also, under More Actions, just really quickly to show you can edit the device, and edit device, as we saw earlier, is how you rename it. There's also another cool feature here called Enable Lost Mode. If, for example, you ever lose an iPad, you can enable Lost Mode, and essentially what that would do is that would put the iPad down in a lockdown state, and I could say something to the effect of, please return to Mr. Silva. And I could put a contact number in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And when I hit send, essentially what that'll do is that'll lock down the iPad in a way that you can't be touched. You can't even interact with it anymore. In fact, I think I can show you. So here's what I see on my iPad right now. Let me rotate it so I can get more of the screen in here. So right now it's completely locked. I'm pressing the home button, nothing's happening. I'm swiping, nothing's happening. I can press the trigger button, but that's really about it. Yeah, it's basically unusable. And the idea is that if I ever lose an iPad and somebody were to find it, I can leave some instructions for that person to find it. They can come return it to me. And then from within AirWatch, I can come back in here. And if I refresh the page, that more actions here, and then enable lost mode will now say disable lost mode. So from here, I can actually click disable lost mode. And what I should see on my iPad is that the iPad is now located. So now I can continue using it again. Now it's totally interactive one more time, and I can, start playing around with it again. So that's lost mode. It's just a little cool thing you can do within AirWatch if you ever do lose your iPad. So that's the details view of the device. Again, just some general information about the device you're looking at. So now what I want to do is I actually want to go in and I want to create groups. I'm going to skip over apps because we need to create groups before we add apps to those groups. So I'm going to switch over to groups and settings over here on the left-hand side. And I'm going to expand groups. And then I'm going to go down to assignment groups. And in assignment groups, this is where I create smart groups. And just really quick, as a side, how this whole thing works is we're going to take our iPads, we're going to put them into what AirWatch calls smart groups, and then with these smart groups, we then apply apps to the smart groups. So you can imagine with this example where I have my library cart iPad, I might want to put it in a group that's called library cart, and maybe I have 20 iPads in that library cart. I'm going to add all 20 of my library cart iPads into one smart group called, library cart iPads. And then when I want to push an app, rather than pushing it over to one individual iPad at a time, I actually push out the app to the group, not just the individual iPads. Now I'm going to show you what I mean here. So first I'm going to click Add Smart Group up here at the top. And it's going to say Create a new Smart Group. We need to give it a name over here on the right-hand side. And I'll call this Library Cart iPads. When you first come into this Create Smart Group window, it's actually on a section here that says Select Criteria. We want to switch over from Select Criteria over to Select Devices or Users. Without going into too much detail, the reason we don't use Select Criteria is it all kind of applies on dynamic information. So, I could set conditions for how it groups iPads as opposed to choosing them manually, which we probably don't want to do. So I'm going to switch over to Select Devices or Users. And this will give me the option to add in devices as I see fit. So under devices here, we'll see it says enter device friendly name. If I put my cursor in here, what should happen is a drop-down menu will appear. And it's actually going to list off all the iPads that I have. Now, this is why I said it's very important to rename your iPads. Not just so that when I'm looking at my list of iPads, I know which one's which, but when it comes time to create a smart group, as you can see, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 iPads that are just called iPad. So I don't really know which one belongs to the library cart unless I've renamed it. But thankfully I did. So down here at the bottom I see library cart number 5. I'm going to select that one. And I'm going to click Add. And it moves over to the right hand side. So this is now the iPad that belongs to the library cart. And I can do this for more than one. So every time I click into this field here, I can select another iPad and click Add. And maybe I'll select another one and click Add. And now I can see that this library cart iPad group has 3 iPads in it. So once I've grouped it, given it a name that's meaningful to me, such as library cart iPads, I can click Save. And that will put them all in one single group called library cart iPads. So now that I have them all grouped, this is where now I can apply apps to the group. So how we do that? We click on the left-hand side here where it says Apps and Books. And what we'll see here is it'll be under Applications and List View. This is the default screen you see. I do just want to say that on this screen, it's not very helpful because, if I'm looking here, there's a bunch of gray icons, and they all say unknown, and, these don't look like my apps. The idea of this screen is that it kind of shows you everyone's apps across the Toronto District School Board. So we actually need to filter this list based on apps that apply to me. And how I can do that is I can either type in my school name or my school trillium number. So I can see here my school name is called Test School, and my trillium number or site code is 99901. I can use either or. I can type in Test School in the search list. And what I'll do is I'll take this giant list and filter it out. So these are all the apps that I have requested. Or of course I can type in the trillion number or site code 99901, and I should see this exact same list here because it filters on both that information. So these are all the apps that are loaded into AirWatch. Now, I guess this is a good time to note how it is that these apps actually got here. These apps didn't get here through me. I didn't put them in here. These are all done through the app request form. So the app request form is actually in the video description at the bottom, and I'll just quickly jot over here. This is what our app request form looks like. From here, you would submit a request for your apps. You would type in all your school names, such as your first name, last name, your role, the email, whether you're a school or a central site, and what kind of apps you want, both free or paid. And at the bottom here, I can add as many apps as I want. I guess, let me see here, let me get that started free, and now I should see, there we go. So I would just type in all the apps that I can possibly think of and I want loaded in AirWatch, so that when I go in there, you know, I can expand and add as many apps as I want, so that when I go back to AirWatch, once that app request form submission is processed, you'll get an email notification telling you we processed your app request form, and then at that moment you know that you should see your apps there. So yeah, I'll just say that when you get a warning when you're trying to select devices and groups, I actually got that same thing too. I don't know if you saw. Yeah. So when you came into groups and settings, I'm just going to quickly switch back to answer this question. But when I clicked Add Smart Group, before we click Select Devices or Users, the reason you came up with that warning is because we actually named it first. So for example, see that warning, how it comes up? It says, by switching, you will lose all the selections made. So let me cancel that. So the reason it prompts you for that is because we can see there's a bunch of iPads listed here, and that's the default behavior. Because right here, we already have some criteria checked off for this smart group type, which is the criteria. So it's just saying that if you switch over, you're going to lose everything you did on this screen, which is fine because we're not even going to use that screen at all. And we didn't even make any changes. This is by default what it decided to do for us. So that's all it says. By switching, you will lose all the selections made for generating the device. Totally fine. We click OK. Now we're going from that select criteria to select devices or users. So now we can actually manually put in those devices. So if you see that warning, don't worry about it. It's just saying you're going to lose any changes. Same thing here. When I switch back to select criteria, it says, you know, by switching, you're going to lose your information. It's fine. We haven't created the group, so it's just warning that if you did do anything, it's going to be gone. So I'm just going to cancel out of that. And getting back to where I was is under Apps and Books, and then in List View. Again, I come over here to the right-hand side, and I search in either my school site code or I type in my school name. I'm going to type in test school. Oops. And what I should see is all the apps that apply to my school. So now I want to apply an app to my iPads. So I'm going to pick an app intentionally just to show you something, but I'm not going to apply it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose Google Sheets. And what happens when I want to assign an app to an iPad, I need to click this button over here. It looks like a pencil on a clipboard. And if I hover my mouse over it, it'll say Edit Assignment. So this tells me that I'm going to assign this app to a smart group. So when I click Edit Assignment, a new window will pop up. Oh, this is actually not a good example. My apologies. Let me find another one. I want to show you so that when you guys see it, you know what to do. Dash and dots. Sorry, we had a demonstration yesterday, and everyone's been messing with the test environment, so I don't know what's been done. Please log in again. What happened? Wow, I got logged out. Okay. Let me try that again. My apologies. This always happens on webinars, you know? When you're working live, that's when everything goes wrong. Sorry for that, guys. So I'm going to switch it back over to Apps and Books, List View. And as we can see, AirWatch is being AirWatch and really slow right now. Filter on either my school name or my site code. See my apps here. And I want to show you something, but I'm not sure which app. I used to have Google Sheets to do that for me, but now I don't know. Oh my God, everyone's been messing with these Angry Birds, maybe? Here we go. This is exactly what I want to show you. Okay, so say, for example, I wanted to assign Angry Birds Rio HD. I'll just cancel out so I show you what I clicked. So here's Angry Birds Rio. And let's say I want to apply it to my library cart group that I have. If this is the first time you are applying apps in AirWatch, particularly every time you go to apply an app in AirWatch, what you're going to see when I click this Edit Assignment button is that there's this big blue button right smack down in the middle of the screen that says Enable Device Assignment. For every app in AirWatch, you will have to press this at least once. I don't want to get into too much of the details of why that is, but essentially if you do not press this button, your iPad will start screaming that it needs an Apple ID. And the whole point of AirWatch for us is we don't want to use the Apple ID. So for every app in your AirWatch environment, you'll see this Enable Device Assignment when you first go to add it. Once you accept it, they'll say, are you sure you want to enable device-based license assignment? Once we click OK, that button will go away, and then we know that that app is good to go. I'm not going to click OK just because I want to show this in future webinars, but that's the idea. If you ever see this blue button, you click it, you click OK, and then you'll never see it a button again. And the idea is that if you don't click that button, it'll ask you for an Apple ID. So I'm going to just do CP24, and we'll see when I click Edit Assignment over here. I'm not going to see that blue button's there. That's because it's already been pressed. And again, it's not going to ask me to do it ever again. And again, somebody's been messing with my environment. Please ignore everything you're saying. Okay. So this is what you'll generally see when you first come into Edit Assignment on an app. So now I want to take that smart group that I just created, and I want to add this app to that smart group. So all three of those iPads that I had in my library cart should get the CP24 Go app. So what I do is I hover my mouse over Add Assignment By. A little drop-down menu will appear, and I'm going to click License Code by Smart Group. And what that does is that brings up a little window here, or I guess a little text field I should say. This is Select Smart Group. And once I put my cursor in there, it's going to give me a drop-down menu of all the smart groups that I previously created. So I created that one called Library Cart iPads. Oh, I have two. I guess I didn't clean up my environment. I believe it's this one. Library Cart iPads. Yes, that's it. So I'm going to select the smart group that I want this app to apply to. And right away it's going to tell me devices, there's 3 of them in there. So this is that group I created earlier. I added, the iPad that I have next to me as well as 2 other iPads that I picked at random. So there's 3 iPads in this group, so I know already that this is going to go to 3 devices based on this smart group that I see here, the Library Cards iPad. But before we actually push it out, there's actually one little important detail. This field here that says allocated. With allocated, it basically means we have to take licenses from our pool and allocate it to this smart group. So for example, I see that this app, even though it is free, we do still have a finite amount of licenses we have to apply. And this is for tracking purposes and compliance purposes. Whenever we, for example, if you request a free app and we put it in AirWatch, you'll see that that free app will have 500 licenses. And we need to do that for reasons that are not entirely clear to me, but nonetheless, we give you an exorbitant amount of licenses for free apps, something around the range of 500. In this case, I only have 100 for this one, but still, again, I don't have 100 iPads, so that's fine. So I need to allocate licenses, enough at least, to accommodate these 3 devices in these smart groups. So what I can do is I can change this value to a 3 or higher. Now, why do I say or higher? So down the road, if, for example, I were to purchase 3 more iPads and I were to add it to the iPad smart group, if I didn't accommodate that future growth of my Library Cart iPad smart groups, I would actually have to come back in here and change that allocated number in the future. So because we have so many licenses to work with, we give you 500 for the free app. I would say that you would want to overcompensate the license. So in the case of my Library Cart iPads, right now there's only 3 iPads in there. But let's say down the road I know, okay, maybe I'm going to buy 10 more, or we have a plan to buy 10 more in the next coming years. So if I'm going to have 10 eventually, or 13 eventually, I'll just round up to 20. So I'm going to shoot for the moon on this number. So because it's a free app, I don't mind. There's no issue with me allocating 20 licenses, even though there's 3 devices. Now it's a little bit different when you have a paid app. Paid apps we'll show here too. But when you're doing a paid app, that one you'll have a set amount of licenses, so you want to make sure that the paid licenses is allocated properly. So I have 20 allocated licenses for my CP24 Go app, and I'm going to then deploy it. There is one field to note here. It says assignment type. There's auto and on-demand. Sorry, when I go to the apps in the right column of symbols, it is not highlighted, so I can't choose the apps. When I go to the apps, the right column of symbols is not highlighted. I'm not entirely sure what you mean. If you don't mind, we can get back to that at the end of the Q&A period, just because it is getting close to the end of the webinar, and I just kind of want to rush through this for those who have to leave. But the idea here, again, is I have my devices, 3 of them. I've allocated 20 licenses, and now I'm going to push the app. I'm going to leave the assignment type as auto. I'll hopefully have time to explain the difference between auto and on-demand, but for now I'm going to leave it as auto. And auto essentially will say that this app is going to push to this iPad right away. So once I click save, it's going to then now push this app to the iPad. Now, like most things with AirWatch, a lot of it is network permitting. So even though I push this app to the iPad, I don't necessarily see it right away. That's not something to be concerned about. AirWatch is very reliant on the network. So if you don't see it right away, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not pushing out. It just means that it hasn't gotten it yet. There are some things you can do to try to kind of wake it up. Sometimes the wireless card falls asleep on iPads. You can open up Safari and just verify, hey, am I even connected to the network? Let's check out TDSB. Oh, okay, so I'm definitely connected. And what should happen is in due time, the app will push down. So I'll keep an eye on it, and when it does push down, I'll show you. I'll switch back over to the iPad so you guys can see. So that's pushing an app. There's also the option to push a web clip. If I click web up here at the top, so before you're on the purchase tab, that's our apps. A web clip is basically like a shortcut, like a browser shortcut. It just takes you to an internet page. And how we do that is we click add application up here at the top. I'm going to choose my platform as Apple iOS. I'm going to click continue. And I'm going to call this, let's say I wanted to create a web clip that takes me to the virtual library. I'll type in virtual library. And let me just grab the URL here. So here's the TDSB. Okay. Oh my God. Okay. So here's the virtual library page. I'm going to take So the link up here at the top, tdsb.on.ca/library. Actually, I could just type that whole part in. So I'm going to take that link. I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to go over to my AirWatch environment, and in the URL field, I'm going to paste in that link. So this is the shortcut that I want it to go to. And I'm going to switch over to images. So now I want to give it a nice friendly looking icon, so it just doesn't appear like a blank icon. So I can choose an image on my computer that will reflect that website. I have one here already, virtual library PNG. So once this makes its way over to the iPad, this is what the icon's going to look like. And then I switch over to the assignment tab. And again, just like with apps, we push this over to smart groups. So it says assigned groups. I put my cursor in here. It's going to bring me that list of smart groups again. And that's when I will scroll down and I will find my library carts iPad. The second I do that, I can see it gives me the option to do it. So I can push this to multiple different ones. Every time I add a different smart group in, it'll give me the option to push it to more. Push mode, again, we're prompted for on-demand or auto. I'm going to choose auto, and auto, again, tells it that it's going to push it to the iPad, no questions asked. On-demand, we'll put it in the catalog, which hopefully I have time to show. So I'm going to click Save and Publish, and just like with the app, it gives me one more confirmation screen, so it's going to push it to these 3 iPads. I'm going to click Publish. You can see my web clip is created, and when I switch back over to my iPad, I can see the virtual library shortcut here, or sorry, web clip, made it right away. Right here. Now the app still hasn't pushed out, and again, apps are a little bit larger, and with the network, sometimes they take a little bit longer to actually make their way over. Generally speaking, it's been pretty good, but I don't see it right now. So actually, I guess while we wait, I can show you what to do with that when I was describing the difference between on-demand and auto. So I'm going to go back to my purchase tab. In my search list, I'm going to choose 9991, which is my school site code. It's going to filter all the apps, and it's going to show me the apps that apply to me. I'm going to find a different app. Let's do Wonder for Dash and Dot. So somebody has already came in here and they've added in their own smart groups for here. So I'm going to add mine in on top of this. So I'm going to hover my mouse over Add Assignment By. I'm going to click License Codes by Smart Group. I'm going to select in here, and I'm going to choose my library card iPads. Where'd it go? I think I went by it. There it is, library card iPads. And again, I know I have 3 devices in this group. I have 500 licenses in total. There's 488 waiting for me to use because these 2 have already taken a good chunk. So I'm going to choose 20 because maybe I'm going to get 20 iPads down the road. And I'm going to scroll down, and that option there where I saw assignment type is auto, I can choose on demand. And on demand basically means that it's not going to force this to push over the iPad. So it's going to make this app optional. It doesn't necessarily install, but you have the option of installing it on the iPad side. And I'll show you what I mean is once I click save, what it's going to do is now on my library card iPad that I have over here, the app doesn't push right away, but if I go over to the agent app, oh sorry, not the agent app, my apologies. That's the agent app. The catalog app. So that's that second AirWatch related icon that we see here. Ooh, catalog. If I click the catalog app, it's going to bring up a list of 2 things. Apps that are supposed to be installed on this iPad and apps that are now optional. So I can see here that Wonder for Dash and Dots is giving me the option to click the install button. So it didn't force it down, but it gives me the option to click the install button. Now I'm seeing CP24 is showing install as well. So it basically detected that it's not there. Now actually let me just verify that I didn't change that. Let's see, if I go to CP24 and I go to edit assignment, now I'm thinking I didn't. No, it's set to auto. So I did set it to auto, but even though it hasn't installed on here, it gives me the option to do a force install. So for whatever reason you're ever seeing that an app isn't installing, even though it's set to auto, which means it should be on this iPad and it's supposed to force its way onto this iPad, I can always from here force the install as well. So if you're feeling a little bit impatient, for example, I can click the install and it'll say, do you want to install CP24? It'll say processing, and usually it's pretty good, but today it's being a little bit slow. So that's stuck on processing. Let's try Wonder for Dash and Dots. So Wonder for Dash and Dots we chose as on demand. And I can click install, and yeah, install. Request to install was received. Oh, so CP24 is now installing. So you can see that even though I told it to force its way onto the iPad, it didn't go right away. And again, that's usually network related. But now what I see here is that I actually had the ability to force it through the catalog. So even though it was an on-demand app, I kind of forced it by coming in here and pressing the install button. And I wonder if I can do the same thing with Dash and Dots. So yeah, press install here. It says your request install was received. Let me refresh this page. And it says processing. So now if I go here, there you go. Now Wonder for Dash and Dots. So that's the difference. On demand says that it's going to go right away. Or sorry, it's going to go to the catalog. And auto means it's going to push itself to the iPad. But again, with these AirWatch, with this AirWatch way of pushing out apps, it all is very dependent on your network, and not just your regular network, but as well as your wireless network connection speed. So sometimes it does take a little bit to see these things, but we can see here that it eventually does make its way down. So if you're ever pushing an app and you're like, why isn't it there yet? You'll probably notice that if you check back later, it'll be there. So that is adding an app. So we added 2 apps. We added one for the catalog. We added one for a force push. We added a web clip, the virtual library. That seems to be the bulk of AirWatch. That's really what I wanted you guys to take away from this webinar. It is now 12:30, and just to be polite to your time, I know you guys are very busy, and I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to tune into this AirWatch webinar. I know it can be a handful. But I'd like to thank you all for being here. I think this will take us to the end of the webinar. So we already did that, and we do have a support page for AirWatch. It's on ServiceIT /MDM, so serviceit.tdsb.on.ca/MDM. And everything there, there's FAQs, there's documentation covering everything that I just did here today. Of course, you can always contact us at the client service desk, 416-395-4357. We are option 5. If you have any questions regarding AirWatch, feel free to call us in and you know, ask us your question there. If you have any questions, this would be the time. So for those who have to go, thank you for sticking around. You will be sent a form, feedback form on the webinar. So if you have any feedback you'd like to give, you can be as mean as possible. It really helps us out. Depending on the feedback you give, we can alter the webinar so that it's, you know, more the content you want to see. So please fill out the feedback form if you do get it. And of course, if you have any questions, you can feel free to contact us. And if you need to go now is a good time. But for those that want to stick around and ask that are more, I got a question about how to do this, I'd be more than willing to take that time now and answer those questions with you. And I can actually, at least in this environment, I can show you everything visibly so you can see what it is that we're referring to. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat. Felipe, did we have any questions that had to be taken aside? Mm-hmm.
That's where the App Store is showing up on her desktop, even though she's not logged into the agent.
So Patrizia, hopefully you don't have to go, but do you? You probably don't, but I'm hoping you do. Do you know the serial number of that particular iPad?
There's only 2 in their environment.
There's only 2 in their environment? Actually, here, I'm going to switch over to your environment. Sorry, what school is Patrizia from? Pelmo Park. So right now you guys are going to see sort of a little bit of an elevated thing that you guys usually won't see. So please feel free to ignore everything here. Schools, and I'm going to go down to P, and let's see what's going on with Pelmo Park. Pelmo. There we go. Yeah, so I see 2 devices here in Pelmo Park, and if I go to the list view, so Patrizia, I'm basically spying on your environment here, and I see your 2 iPads, Library 3 and Library 4. So is it that one of these, both of them are doing that?
There's a ticket in the MDM bucket.
Interesting.
But it's so there's nothing really listed.
Apple Store still listed on iPads. Interesting. So user rolled the iPads on AirWatch, and App Store is still listed on the iPads.
Yeah.
Huh.
So it's something that I've never seen before.
Oh.
Where you have to log in. You usually have to log into the agent to see the actual App Store come up, but she's not logging into the agent.
Okay, thank you for attending. We will definitely get into contact with Cheryl, and we'll see if we can get you. We're not gonna. I'm gonna try not to just send instructions because LAS is a little bit fun. But I will definitely. I'll try to connect with your principal, and I'll remote in, and we'll walk her through how to actually put you into AirWatch, and then 24 to 48 hours later, you should have access. Yeah, so that's a good question. I missed the first 10 minutes, so I'm not sure if I can replay. This video that you're looking at right now, this exact same URL, you can actually go back and watch it later. So you can, you can go back to the beginning. There really wasn't much at the beginning, just more about messing with the settings of YouTube and kind of, the fluffy stuff. But this same video, you can actually go back and watch it 100 times. Or basically, we do this every other Thursday. So not next Thursday, but the next Thursday, same time, the same channel. You can watch the webinar again, and we do that for a new set of users. So if you ever want to come and watch the next one or the next one, you can follow our channel here on YouTube, and you'll be notified when we go live for the next one. So not only can you not watch it, you can watch this one again over and over again if you want, but you can also watch all the new ones if you want at 10. It's always 11:30 every other Thursday. So I hope that's helpful. Now, getting back to that thing, I actually am seeing sort of what the problem is here. I don't know if I don't think this is any fault of your own, but I'm glad we have the ticket because, Patrizia, I'm looking at your environment, and what I see here is that it says Pelmo Park Shared Open. There are actually 2, let me just show you, hopefully this is clear. So, is there any way to zoom? Zoom tool. Zoom tool. Is there a zoom tool? Forget it. So there's Pelmo Park Shared Open and Shared Check-in. And what's happening is when you enrolled your devices, where they're supposed to go is into this shared check-in sort of option, and as the name implies, that check-in is what that check-in feature is all about. So that check-in, if they end up in that little folder, or in the way that AirWatch calls them is organizational groups, if they were in that shared check-in organizational group, then you would see that behavior. Sure, if you want, I can always just show you on the phone. But the short end of it, Patrizia, is that this is a problem that you shouldn't be seeing, and it's not something you did. It's something to do with your account. So we have the ticket logged, and I'm actually going to escalate that to our AirWatch admin teams, and they'll be able to show you. Or not show you rather, but they'll be able to correct that, and we'll probably have to wipe those devices again because they're not supposed to be in there. They're supposed to be in the shared check-in, and that's what does that check-in behavior. I'm not sure if anyone's still there. We'll take that offline, Patrizia. But for anyone else who has any questions, now is the time to ask. Any other questions? I know there's a little bit of a delay between the time I'm speaking and the time you guys see it and the time I read on the chat, so I'm just going to give you guys some more time for those who want to ask any questions. Anything and everything relating to AirWatch, of course. Sorry, for now you're gonna have to actually wait, Patrizia, because this is something that needs to be done on the back end. It's not something that I can actually even do from here. Yeah, you'll be notified via email when that's ticket logged. But we were able to pull up the ticket here, so I'm gonna escalate that to our app admin team, and they will definitely get that resolved for you. And I'll actually ask them because it may be that you might have to re-enroll them, but I'm not entirely certain. Yeah, they can. So they might move them over from the shared open to the shared check-in, where they're supposed to be. But I'm not entirely sure whether that will resolve the issue. So I'll make sure I note on the ticket that to explain where to go from there. But I'm almost positive it's just a matter of moving them over, I think. But you can see, for example, when I go to my test school here, all my devices. I can't really click here. Come on. Well, I can't see anymore. But all my devices are in. Oh, mine are in shared open too, actually. Well, now I just don't know. It's definitely got something to do with the account that you use to enroll. that you're basically your school's 4-digit trillion number. So they'll have to get that corrected. Any other questions? I see there's now only 4 people watching, so people are slowly dropping off. Let me see the participants here. Okay. Yeah, it looks like everyone's actually gone, except for you, Patrizia. So, Patrizia, we'll take this offline. I'm going to move your ticket over to the app admin group, and that should be dealt with. So, if you have anything else, please do ask it now. Otherwise, I'm going to end this webinar very shortly. When I initially set them up, do I set them up as new or existing? Oh, I see what you're saying. So yeah, when you're looking at the MDM website, let me bring it up here, and then we go to the training materials. There's the 2 options for new or existing. Basically, existing would be for iPads that weren't in AirWatch before they were wiped, and new is for like a brand new iPad. So you can actually follow the new iPad setup here. So what I would say to do, if in the event that we have to wipe them, I'm not even sure if we have to wipe your devices. So I'll leave that to the ticket to decide. We'll definitely consult with our app admin team to see whether you do indeed need to wipe them, and if you do, how we would do it is actually, let me just switch back here. We would go over to your school OG, and we'll wipe them from AirWatch. So that's the easiest way to do it. So if they decide that in order for this to take effect, we need to actually wipe and re-enroll, we would come in here, look at your iPads, and I showed it on the webinar. But let's say they're like, okay, yeah, we definitely need to re-enroll it now. You could just click. You can even click these check marks here and do more actions. And oh no, not from here. Sorry, my apologies. You would click the device itself, and you go to more actions, and then device wipe. And what that'll do is that'll force it to wipe itself, and then you have to go through the enrollment again. So is enrollment as a new iPad or existing iPad or non-TDSP iPad? Yeah, I think, the delay is causing a problem here, but I answered that, yeah. It's basically, once you wipe it, it'll be new iPad. So I would wipe it from AirWatch here, go to more actions, device wipe, and then we would type in the PIN number that we set up. Once we type in the PIN number, the device will start wiping, and then once it's done wiping, you would follow the new iPad setup. It's the same instructions. But again, I'm not entirely sure whether you need to wipe it, so don't worry about that just yet.
It hasn't really been set up yet.
Oh, they're not?
Yeah, there's still a ticket for them.
Oh,
And there's still
okay.
first step, so
Yeah.
that's why there's a lot of
But we can definitely expedite that part, because if they're doing self-enrollment, oh no, it's IT assisted.
So like it's still with
Yeah.
agent.
Hmm.
That's why she's looking for apps at her school.
Right.
There was none listed.
Right. Yeah, so based on also what I see here is that your school, because you went through the IT assisted route, which means that we have you scheduled in for somebody to go to your school and round up all your iPads and do this process for you. Part of that ticket is a process to verify that your environment is working okay, and that might be why this was missed. So it may just not be set up yet. Not that there's anything wrong with you enrolling your iPads right now ahead of time. So we'll definitely have to. Yeah, well so what about the other 78 iPads? So with the ticket that we have here for Pelmo Park is already an IT assisted ticket. And how that process works is our field services people will go on site, and they will come in a team, and basically they will take all your iPads, round them up in one room, and boom, 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 they'll put them all in AirWatch, and then you'll all see them here in the list view. And that's just for schools that sort of have like a large amount of iPads, like 78 iPads. So that's you're currently already scheduled for that. Yeah. So. But I mean, as of right now, because you can still technically start enrolling iPads. The only thing is that because we're seeing this issue here, we are not seeing the check-in, check-out. That might be something we want to address first. So we have a separate ticket for that. Hopefully, it's something that they can do or enable or make sure. And then you can actually enroll iPads while you're waiting even for field services to go on site and do that process for you. Yeah. But also, yeah, you want to keep in mind that you won't have any apps in your AirWatch environment, because right now how this whole thing works is there's sort of like a process that we follow. Basically, once we've decided whether your school is going to do self-enrollment or the field assist ticket, where we send the team on site to help you with that. This process sort of breaks off into different steps, and one of them is to provide you with this webinar. We ask you for what apps do you want to see in your environment, which I don't know. You said you looked in their environment.
Yeah, if you search for
0226.
or even Pelmo,
Let's see. 0226. Yeah. So you've submitted. So part of that process is you also, nothing for Pelmo. So part of that process is when we ask you to submit this app request form, and it's basically, we ask you just for free apps. We say, give us a list of all the free apps you want, and then we put that into AirWatch before you're off to the races to use it. But because you're sort of jumping the gun here, none of that's been done. So, you know what? Definitely, just because of the time, we're gonna definitely have to take this offline. I have to end the webinar here, but yeah. No, you definitely can do it. There's nothing wrong with trying to do it. And like I said, yeah, if you want to jump the gun, that's totally fine. But tell you what, I'm gonna send you an email directly, and then we'll take this offline, and you can forward all your questions to me. So you should be getting an email from me shortly in about like 20 minutes when I get back to my desk. But I have to end the webinar just because it's way over time. So again, thank you very much for attending, and Patrizia, expect an email from me very shortly. Thank you all very much. Take care and enjoy your afternoon. Bye-bye.